I think there's wisdom in realizing that things aren't just gonna, most often, things are not just going to change spontaneously. Things are going to change when we make them change. When we decide we want them to change, and then we do something about it. But sometimes we have to get suffering enough to get that much conviction, don't you think? Sometimes there's, even though that, well, I might be aware of some of my patterns that I would like them to change, but they're not really bothering me that much until they are. Happy New Year, Life Force Academy. I feel like 2024 is our year. Might as well feel like it. The only other option is you don't feel like it's your year. Or I guess maybe also, or if I'm not sure if it's my year. But it will be, because we'll make it that way. You know what I mean? And of course we can't control most of the outer circumstances of our lives. So we can't say, like, I can't realistically say this is going to be my year if I'm referencing predominantly the outer circumstances of my life. Like things are going to go, in other words, the way I wish for them to go. However, if I have conviction that no matter how things go, I'm going to make it my year by being able to, meet whatever is happening as it is with less pushing away the things that are painful and difficult, and less also grasping on to the things that are pleasurable. Of course, we want to grasp onto the things that are pleasurable because they're pleasurable. But grasping is not enjoying. Those are two different things. Grasping is an emotional state that has needs, is needy. And realistically, we all have needs, and we need to grasp, and we need to attach onto things. But slowly but surely, in little baby steps, we can be more clear on what it means to fulfill our basic needs versus clinging onto emotional stimulus that we feel like will fulfill our needs. Because we never know what our life is going to bring. And so that's really, to me, like the essence of Dharma practice is to be involved in that process, is less attaching onto things and less pushing away things. But that's hard. That's like, it's very simple, like philosophically. It's not hard to understand the concept, but it's very hard to embody and to practice because it kind of confronts the most vulnerable and tender parts of ourselves that often because we're such a vulnerable part of ourselves, that then those are where our strong emotions can be found because they're there to kind of protect that space naturally. Don't you think? And it's like and there's a wisdom to that. That's not like a negative thing. There's a wisdom to that we should protect ourselves. We should kind of be, as much as possible, the master of our own domain, meaning we are making the decisions about what we allow into our personal space and what we decide is not allowed in our personal space. Those are decisions we get to make if we have the emotional maturation to do so. And that's a process, because then what's also changing all the time? What is it that we desire? Who is it that we feel that we are? All of these things are fluid, and it's a constant rediscovery of who we are, life, isn't it? And so then, that's why the simple path of Dharma is just really two main things. It's wisdom this is what we're talking about, cultivation of wisdom based on life experience. And the other is love, is compassion. And every step of the way, if there's compassion there to meet whatever it is that is really asking of those tender, vulnerable parts of ourselves to be expressed. And that takes courage in order to, because, like, for instance, say you feel like envious of like an ex, like a relationship that broke apart, and maybe it didn't break apart in the most harmonious of ways, and there's some spite there, or there's some jealousy of what's going on there, etc., etc. We all know what that feels like. And so, but the tenderness of the heart wants to still love, but we feel hurt, and so sometimes it feels good to be like, fuck them. It does, right? And that's part of the grieving process, and just the key is not to get stuck there, but because to get stuck there then is a state of misery, this self-inflicted misery. And actually the liberating thing is to love. And that can be done in difficult circumstances with the compassionate heart. Because even though I might feel upset with this person or the actions of this person, I know that if they did any harm, they only did that because they themselves are suffering too. That's the only way harm happens. And so then, even though I'm going to have the wisdom to have personal boundary in what I now allow in my personal space and I don't allow in my personal space, I'll have that wisdom. But it won't lack compassion, you see? And that's how we can kind of hold our own ground in life and also not close our hearts to recognize the suffering of others in all circumstances. And that's why this simple thing of I like to start the new year with just arousing, so to speak, or reflecting upon what the Buddha called the 4 boundless attitudes, or sometimes called the 4 immeasurables. And that's number 1 is boundless happiness, or it's boundless love, which is the wish of happiness. You wish to be happy, yeah? We all do. We all share that in common. Everybody does. And then the second is boundless compassion, which is the wish to not have to suffer. We all have that wish. We all don't wish to suffer. And then the third is where it starts to get really good, and that's called boundless joy. And that's when you find pleasure in other people's happiness and other people's pleasures. So that's that's a skill one can develop. It's a muscle you can develop, just like anything else. You might not everything do we come in already, those muscles developed. We have to develop them, and particularly with the mind, even more so with the body. Because the body is, you can see it change, you can touch it, you can injure it. With the mind is more subtle, isn't it? And so, but the patterns of the mind are tremendously persistent. And it takes more persistence in the other direction in order to change the patterns of the mind. And so, I think there's wisdom in realizing that things aren't just gonna, most often, things are not just going to change spontaneously. Things are going to change when we make them change. When we decide we want them to change, and then we do something about it. But sometimes we have to get suffering enough to get that much conviction, don't you think? Sometimes there's, even though that, well, I might be aware of some of my patterns that I would like them to change, but they're not really bothering me that much until they are, until something happens. And that often happens via relationship. A lot of the times we're fine with how we are, but that person we're living with is not. and you agreed to live with each other, or you agreed to be in this love affair with each other, or whatever it is, and you got to work it out. Is the patterns going to change, or is the relationship going to end? Basically, that's what it comes down to. If otherwise, things are okay. And so that's why relationships can be so wonderful, actually, because they put a spotlight on our own inner patterns that often would take much longer for us to recognize on our own. Yeah, so that's the yoga of relationship. Obviously, that's not all of what relationship is about, because that would be a drag, is to just reveal the patterns of the mind. But the idea in revealing the patterns of the mind is not because they're bad. It's because you get happy when they transform. You get more blissful. You get more happier when they transform. When suffering-provoking patterns start to transform into compassion patterns. So in other words, instead of feeling that kind of spite or that vengefulness or that jealousy or that bitterness, as soon as you feel it, you can take the simple practice of see if you can feel compassion for their suffering. See if you can first recognize that they're suffering, and see if you can feel compassion for that suffering when you're ready, But sooner the better. As soon as you feel like that's a realistic possibility for you. You know what I mean? I say it to myself, same process. And then, little by little, it's like you're the one getting happy. You know what I mean? It's less really about that other person. And it's more about you getting happier. And then the happier you get, then the better any relationship gets. And the more clear it is which ones you don't gonna spend any of your time on. Because there's not happiness there. And so it's good. It's called, the clarity of inner confidence. And that creates all the prosperity in the world. Because it puts you kind of squarely in the river current of Dharma, of the Dharma of one's life. So it's not that difficult, to go find the Dharma is not the thing. You already are the Dharma. You are everything about each of our lives already is our unique path through life, but aligning with that is what we mean when we say kind of seeking the Dharma, or getting in alignment with the Dharma of one's life. All we really need to do is to be, number one, involved in this patterning transformation, noticing the emotional tendencies that are making me suffer more, and then how do I transform those? Like give myself a demerit? No, that's just self-compassion. You recognize your own suffering in those moments. So in both cases, whether it's going in the direction of the other person or in the direction of oneself, those are represented by the first and seventh houses of the zodiac. The first house is the first house of self. That's the eastern horizon where the sun rises. And the seventh house is the point where the sun sets, and that's the house of the other. And so in both cases, it's if it's difficult, it's recognizing that one is suffering, and then feeling the emotions that are arising due to that suffering, and meet those emotions with a feeling of kindness and compassion for oneself. And that thing it doesn't make it go away, because we're not trying to make it go away. In fact, we're embracing whatever life is bringing us, and the difficult things we can meet with the feeling of love. And whether it's a difficult thing with us, or a difficult thing with us and another person, or a difficult thing with us and the outer society, or the polarized, the incredibly, at this point of our lives, polarized divide in our society. And that's just a manifestation of a polarization that's happening on a much more subtle level. And so the more that each of us, how do you neutralize polarity? It's love. This is the only way. But it has to be functional love. Love is functional when it's encompassed, when it's in wisdom. the two-winged bird of the bodhicitta, the wisdom and compassion. So it's actually quite simple, and I like to keep that simple because when things are difficult, we need to lean upon something that's super simple, not complicated philosophy or anything like that. So I'll just read this thing to you that I was reading before we started, and then we'll start to move our bodies, okay? This is this Tibetan master named Jigme Lingpa, and he's discussing the 4 boundless attitudes. Love means wishing for the happiness of others, like a loving mother cherishing her child. One's body, wealth, and virtue all amassed, one gives for others' benefit. So all the prosperity that we are amassing in our lives, we're offering that for others' benefits. And then it's like, well, what about me? That's the best thing I can do for me. Because as soon as I have a genuine care for the other, I'm immediately the first one that is benefiting. That makes bliss. Because it's not like, because it's moralistically right. No, it's participating in the innate interconnectivity of life that we're all already involved in all the time. So love means wishing for the happiness of others, like a loving mother cherishing her child. One's body, wealth, and virtue all amassed, one gives for others' benefit, while training to endure the harms that they inflict. This is wisdom. While training to endure the harms that they inflict, because as much as I might be loving towards another, that does not mean that they're coming back to me with the same energy. Compassion is a powerful state of mind, an inability to tolerate the fact that others suffer. Beings in the 6 realms are entrapped by sorrow and its cause, and seeing this brings tears to one's eyes. Joy is to delight in others' pleasure and success. It is to cultivate the wish that all have happiness. It is a joy one feels when they achieve it for themselves. Wouldn't that be great if you could feel the same type of joy when others get it like you would if you got it? That's what it's saying. That's something to aspire to, but again, it's like, that's not me. I'm not like that. Not yet. But these are not something, it's like we either are or we aren't. We all have our starting point, but we can continually blossom. So it is to cultivate the wish that all have happiness. It is a joy one feels when they achieve it for themselves, and it is the wish that they should never be deprived of it. May their cup always overflow. And then finally, the 4th boundless attitude is impartiality, boundless equanimity. Impartiality is freedom from attachment and hostility. Those are the 2 sides of the same coin, attachment and hostility. When sides and factions are all seen as equal, when enemy and friend are, and neither are treated with an even-handed kindness. Enemies, friends, and neutrals. When sides and factions are all seen as equal, when enemy and friend and neither are all treated with an even-handed kindness. We should practice the 4 attitudes, remembering that all is without true existence. And he's referencing the teaching of emptiness, that all relative things are empty of any ultimate substance, good and bad, up and down, female, male, etc., birth and death. That anything that exists within relative context lacks ultimate substance, lacks ultimate truth, ultimate reality. So, we all already kind of know that though, deep down, because as soon as you bring yourself into a meditative space, all of that makes easy sense. But when we're swinging in the polarities of our life, that's hard to make sense of that. But what they call emptiness, which is often very difficult for us Westerners to understand, and also just humans to understand, because it means we need to be cultivating subtle perception. Subtle perception allows us to be able to be less polarized on each side, That's intuition. Developing the intuitive psyche is what yoga practice is all about, so that I can navigate my life with good wisdom and not be kind of pummeled by the waves of emotional difficulties when they arise. So anyhow, that anytime we go into the meditative state, it neutralizes the polarities, and out of that comes love, it comes bliss. That's why they call it bliss, void, indivisible. It's like the womb of creation. She is love. It is love. It's beyond she and he. It's non-conceptual at that point. Because anything that we're going to conceive of and be able to talk about and discuss and think about even in our own mind relies on relativity, relies on comparisons, plus and minuses, good and bad, negative and positive. The meditative state is the great relief. It relieves you of all of that on our nervous systems. And it opens up the central channel to where you get real wisdom, real perspective on life. And the person who has the ability to kind of go into their meditative power and to open up that central channel, always you'll have the wisdom that you need to, no matter if this 2024 brings like great pleasures or great difficulties, you can still make it your year. But it'll take Shakti.
Thanks for watching on YouTube. Best easy way to stay in touch with us. Hit the subscribe button here. You'll see our videos when they come up. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button. It'll help more people see it, help the channel grow. I appreciate you watching.